Hello, everybody, and welcome to Veganic Gardener's Question Time. My name's Dan, and I'm from the Vegan Organic Network. We're an educational charity, and we're all about creating a green, clean, cruelty-free world, a world with clean rivers and oceans, abundance of wildlife, and healthy, nutritious food for all. We're an educational charity, and we've got quite a few different projects we're involved with. We do stock-free organic certification for farms, which is basically stock-free is another word for veganic. So first of all, a farm needs to get certified as organic, and they have a further certification to show that they're not using any animal inputs. So we do stock-free certification, and now also we've got a magazine which goes out twice a year. And we've just started a new project called the Growing Nature Academy. So we're organising school visits to stock-free organic farms, such as we've got 3 pilot farms happening this year. There's the Tree of Life Veganics, Tolhurst Organic, and the Dalton Moor Farm. So they're going to have lots of school children running around their lovely farms, eating veganic fruit and veg. And I'm sure you've all heard of the Von map by now. I'm sure you're all on it. And this afternoon, I had a quick look at the map to see what was going on. And I just randomly clicked on some pictures and some projects. So there's the Pole Hagen, the Arctic Garden. So these people are gardening in the Arctic. They've got a veganic biodynamic farm. They host vegan pizza nights during the Arctic summer season. And the main guiding principle of their farm is Ahimsa, non-violence. And then I clicked on somewhere in Africa. So this is the Rukor Vegan Women's Group in Uganda, which is a dedicated collective of vegan women committed to advancing a plant-based lifestyle. This project was one of 50 vegan women's projects in Africa, which the Vegan Organic Network provided funding for for seeds and tools. So they're all on the map. So yeah, go and explore Africa. Then there was let's have a look. This I clicked on somewhere in New Zealand, Gentle World, nestled in Victoria Valley in the far north of New Zealand is Shangri-La, is a project of Gentle World, registered charitable trust. 2 rivers flow through 454 acres of sacred bushland in Northland's Mangamuka Gorge, providing ample fresh water. There's these guys in Ecuador, Fruit Haven. At Fruit Haven Eco Village, Ecuador, they envision a worldwide network of decentralized autonomous fruitarian communities. And randomly picked on this one in Malaysia. What were they doing? They're a permaculture, little family, and they got a permaculture. But now, since we started the map, which was only last year, towards the end of last year, we've got almost 1,000 people, and these are just a random selection. So there's lots of people. Go on, explore the map, plan your next tour of the world or tour of your community. There could be someone just down the road just waiting to meet you, or someone down the road that needs help picking their fruit and veg, and you might get some free stuff if you're lucky. So yeah, the Von map. And today's show is all about gardening questions. Oh, we've got a couple of comments here. Let's have a look, see what comments we've got. We've got Becky. Oh, Becky recently put herself on the Von map. And I recently put myself on the Von map. This is the 3rd year. I love it in the Northwest England. Go for it, Becky. Okay, so with panel, let's get to our gardening questions. Who have we got on tonight's panel? Who should we go for first? Here we have Than, horticulture teacher, expert, forager, wildlife enthusiast. great guy, all round human being. Used to live in London and now is living in the Northeast. How you doing, Than?
Yeah, very well, Dan. Yeah, very good.
Good stuff. What's been happening?
Well, we're frantically things that we should have done earlier, really. We're sort of prepping the garden, putting down some mulch of areas where we've been very lazy. Really, it should have been done in the autumn. But still in this sort of phase of not redesign, just designing the garden since we've acquired it 2 years ago. So and putting in lots of shrubs and trees. So yeah, very busy in the last few days actually.
And how big's your garden?
It's about it's big for us, but it's very small in the grand scheme. It's about 50 meters long.
Right, okay.
But quite narrow, so it's about 4 meters wide, so about 200 square meters. So it's not probably like a half an allotment block type thing.
And is it south facing, north
Yeah,
facing?
so we're very, very blessed in that sense. It's south facing, so lots of potential. It's on a slope. We're in the northeast of England, so the seasons are quite short, but it's about working with that. So, lots of how do we, work with the wetter areas, the drier areas, create some shade with those trees and shrubs and things. But yeah.
Excellent. Okay, let's see who else we got. Thank you, Than. Let's see who else we got on the panel tonight. We've got one of our original guests, the world famous top journalist, won many awards, including, I've got them written down here, author of three-time winner of the Guardian Media Guild Best Journalist Award. His latest book, The Super Organic Gardener, Everything You Need to Know About a Vegan Garden. There you go. Go out and get it. Man, Mathew Appleby, also the editor of the Von magazine, Growing Green International.
Oh, thanks, Dan. Joint editor with Paul Hanson.
Oh yeah, sorry, Paul.
Who does all the hard work. Great to be on, Dan, and it was great to be on the original one as well. Why haven't I been on one since? No, that's not true.
So you were telling me earlier on you were at an NFU conference today. Tell us all about it. What happens in the NFU world?
I was at the NFU conference yesterday, and a few things stood out for me. The NFU said we need a solution to deal with beavers if they're going to be released, and that solution is how to kill them, which I was like, that is not great. There was very little mention of growing fruit and veg, but there certainly was no mention of organics or veganics, which I kind of expected, the organic veganic thing. But DEFRA announced a thing called the land use framework, which is about kind of, using bits of hill land for different uses like tree planting and environmental things, which obviously NFU isn't so keen on because it wants every bit of land to carry on being used, and it wants that hill sheep land to be carried on being used for grazing sheep, even if people eat less sheep, which obviously people are doing, and it's recommended by the Climate Change Committee and all that stuff, because they say, well, we'll just carry on producing as much sheep meat because we can export it. I was thinking, are things moving on at all in their minds? Not very much. So there's a big lot of work to do there. But it was really interesting, quite enlightening, and quite entertaining. There was 20 tractors parked outside that beeped their horns throughout to protest about inheritance tax. So that was just outside Westminster Abbey. So it was a memorable event.
And did the NFU get government funding?
No, it's member funded. They're funded by, but they do have the ear of the government, though less of Labour government than of the Conservatives.
Yeah, because it wasn't in 2018 the government brought in some stricter rules on environmental pollution and river pollution, which then after talks with the NFU, they were totally watered down. So basically farmers now don't get prosecuted for polluting our waterways.
Yeah, and that sort of thing happens a lot. I mean, there's supermarkets are quite keen to, you get red tractor, a mark on food stuff like a quality standard, and supermarkets are quite keen to bring in an environmental part of that. But the farmers said, no, we don't want that because it'll cost us money. So they've managed to kind of get rid of it, and you know, that's kind of the push and pull going on in sort of farming politics.
So, do the NFU represent all farmers? I mean, do you have contact with lots of farmers? Because a lot of farmers are tenant farmers, and they have to be a dairy farm. It's not like they can choose to do something different. It's like, I've got a dairy farm, and then you're basically managing it.
Yeah, a lot of farmers are in it, and one of the main reasons they're in it is because the NFU provides cheap insurance, and you need to have insurance. So, but yeah, there's I would say most farmers are members, and they probably get a lot of good out of it. But yeah, I mean, as people always say, yeah, NFU aren't really a union which we understand a union to be like for the workers. It's a union for the bosses.
Right. Okay, well, maybe we need to do a separate program on the NFU.
Anyway, no, that was just what I was doing yesterday, so I just mentioned.
All right, interesting stuff. Well, we'll catch up in a minute, and I'm get your expertise on some of the questions. Thanks, Mathew.
Thanks.
And next we have the incredible Claire Turner, a veganic gardener with a focus on perennial plants. Claire, good to see you.
Dan.
Hi, I think we first met at London Veg Fest, didn't we?
Yes, we did, on the Vegan Organic Network stall. Yeah.
Yeah, you were like the best person on you're like answering all the. If you want a gardening question, go to Claire. She's got all the answers.
I just like talking about plants and gardening with people. Yeah.
Well, you were super knowledgeable, and I think everyone appreciated you being there. So that was really good. But since then, you've moved up to the northeast.
Yes, so in the northeast England, so kind of back to where I'm originally from, but not next to it. I actually grew up on a conventional mixed farm, so the National Farmers Union was a big part of my childhood. So it's quite interesting, almost coming full circle, and here I am working in veganics, but actually being brought up with the kind of other background, as it were, from my formative years.
So are your parents, are they still conventional farmers? Do they farm animals?
No, all arable now. But interestingly, in this country, a lot of arable farming. So, the likes of wheat, barley, oats, beans, that kind of thing, either end up in animal feed. Some of them end up as oils or going to provide fuel, and then some of them get exported. So very little of what is actually grown in this country is directly consumed by humans.
Yeah, that's because sometimes it could be consumed by people, but because of the way it looks and things like that, then it's seen as not fit for human consumption. Is that right?
Yeah, some of it, the grade of the land might be seen as not suitable for making bread or biscuits with. So the crops not got quite the right content for how now products are manufactured. But also, I think a lot of the time we don't have the market. So things like fava beans, we don't have a very big market, even though traditionally it's a crop that we would have eaten. Most of it gets exported to places like Egypt and is consumed there.
Oh, right. Okay. So are they organic, your parents?
No, not organic, not veganic. Yeah, so quite a distance to where I've ended up.
So have you heard of Lawrence Candy?
Yes.
Yeah, so he was a former beef and dairy farmer, and now he's an arable farmer farming oats and wheat. And he's actually a veganic farmer. So and he's talking about he'd like to make veganic oat milk. I think it's getting enough quantity. So maybe if you could persuade your parents to grow veganic oats, and you could collaborate with Lawrence, and you could have veganic, because the thing is, there aren't any plant milks that are vegan. It sounds like a bit of a contradiction, or being grown in a vegan way. So you can't actually buy a plant milk that's properly vegan. So yeah, anyhow, maybe sow a seed somewhere, but there could be some good business in it, because I think vegans would love to be able to. I think if there was a veganic milk out there, I think there'd definitely be a market for it. Certainly would be with me. I'd buy it.
No, I think there's lots of opportunities for actual food that's grown veganically that could feed us as vegans. Absolutely.
So you were telling me about your raspberries. This is you tell me about the planting you've been doing.
Yeah, so we put in a native hedge, and the native hedge is quite little, a year old. And we had some summer fruiting raspberries. So I thought, let's interplant the native hedge while it's still young with summer fruiting raspberries. And the idea, it's a bit of an experiment, is maybe the small hedge plants would be able to support the summer fruiting raspberries, which will get quite tall, provide some shade, and let's just see how they work together, really. So yeah, it's been quite interesting these last few days, getting them in the ground.
So if you are thinking of planting raspberries, now's the time to do it, is that right?
Yeah, now's a good time if you want to get them in the ground. A kind of nice, fairly shady spot for them. They don't like to be too hot. That was the mistake I made last year.
And do they like being in the shade or the sun?
And they need a little bit of both. But I put them in full sun last year. That was a bad idea. They really were unhappy.
Oh, poor raspberries. Great. Okay, well, on with the show, on with the questions. Let's have a look. Let's bring the other guys up onto the screen, this high-tech world. So let's have a look. We all ready? Ready to go. So look, question 1. Wait, so I'll just get rid of this logo thing because it's in the way of the writing. Good day. I have a little potato. Not potato. I have a little patio outside my flat. I have large troughs and tubs to grow flowers, fruits, herbs, and vegetables. My large plot of mint is infested with aphids. How do I get rid of them and so prevent all my other plants becoming susceptible? Presently, I've wrapped it up in a large plastic shopping bag to contain the pests. If there's no solution, I'll have to throw it out and start all over again. A waste of money. I can't afford it. Thanks in advance, from Gail in London. Well, can we help Gail out? I hope we can. Anybody want to take us on this question? Just put your hand up if you feel confident. All right, Claire.
Let's go with this one. Yeah, so I guess in a well kind of formed ecosystem, we'd have plenty of predators that would eat the aphids. If you're in a patio in London, you probably don't have quite the ecosystem developed. So you're at the stage where you've got plant and it's covered in aphids. In some ways, thankfully, it's a mint plant, because even if you were to cut it all back this year and just go, actually, you know what, I don't want the aphids to spread, you could cut it all back to ground level and the plant would regrow next year, and hopefully you'd then be able to keep an eye out and see if the aphids came and cut back and try and stop them infesting for the next year. One of the nice things is that aphids tend to prefer certain plants, so depending on what you've got planted next to your mint, they might not spread onto those plants. So I know there was a concern that it might then infest all the plants. That's not necessarily the case. So that's just something to be aware of. I'm not sure how effective the plastic bag would be. I've never tried it. If it is, then I guess that's one idea. But it may be that the aphids would just find a way out and then spread elsewhere. One of the things you can do to build a little bit more of an ecosystem is think about what you're planting next to your other plants. So you could be planting plants that support hoverflies, so things with nice orange flowers like calendula. You could be trying to get a bigger ladybird population, so leaving your vegetation higher through the winter rather than cutting it back, so that the ladybirds have somewhere to nest through the winter. And just generally thinking about how you're creating a bit more of an ecosystem on a patio. I know it's not that easy because it's a patio, but just starting to think about how you can build in places for natural predators of aphids to live, so that it doesn't affect you for future seasons.
Brilliant. Thank you. Anybody got anything to add to Claire's solution?
Yeah, I mean, again, I'd say diversity of habitats. Just these nooks and crevices where things can overwinter, things that eat the aphids, like your ladybirds and your hoverfly larvae. Hoverfly larvae actually like even they breed in stagnant, kind of a muddy, boggy, watery sort of habitat. You could even leave a bucket with sort of wet, damp, decaying woody materials, and that will encourage hoverflies to breed, and their larvae would then hopefully feed on your aphid. It's really about thinking creatively. We're trying to mimic the ecosystem, and it's quite fantastic. It's a far more abundant and rich garden that you can create by doing so. Really just similar to what Claire said.
Great.
I don't know if anybody thinks about what anybody thinks about maybe planting sort of strong smelling plants next to them, like, you know, onions or garlic. Has anyone ever had any success with that? Which puts off the aphids, you know, sort of they don't like the smell, the pungentness.
Yeah, it may. I've always interspersed perennial onions and garlic in the garden. I've never had any issue really with aphids, and that could be part of it. Yeah.
Stinging nettle is also very good because the nettle aphid, which feeds on the stinging nettle, will be there if you can attract them in early. They're one of the earliest aphids to arrive. And then that also provides food for your ladybird populations to build up, which you could then hop onto your mints and other plants which are susceptible later down the line. So a lot of growing sites, it's more reason. Stinging nettle is a fantastic plant in itself. Even if it didn't do that, I think it's worth having that around, which you can do. I know we think of it as a wild plant, but in a sort of part shady area of your patio, in a large sort of pot with rich soil, keep it damp. Certainly you can have a little population, a little area for nettles as well.
Excellent. Well, I think lots of good advice there. So Gail, we look forward to hearing from you, and let us know if it's worked, maybe in a few months' time. Okay, let's stroll on to number 2. Are there any perennial alternatives to annual alliums like onions and garlic? That's from Alice in Cambridge. Anyone want to try this one?
Yeah, I can go. Yeah, so alliums are like a forager's go-to, really. A lot of your wild alliums. So we have wild garlic, which we think of as a forageable, but actually there's no reason why you can't sort of buy some bulbs or and put them in the shadier part of your garden. They're actually up, they're starting to come up now, actually, even where we are in my back garden. So wild garlic, three-cornered leek, a fantastic perennial allium triquistrum, which can actually take over. That's how successful it is as a plant. So, but a fantastic edible at this time of year. Crow garlic, Allium vineale, lots and lots of them, and and the common sort of Welsh onion as well, which is your sort of bunching, also known as your Japanese bunching onions, which are your perennial onions. It's lots, huge amounts. Great question. I was actually thinking about, instead of harvesting sort of a plant and finishing it off in one go, could we not be harvesting the leafier parts so it keeps coming back again? It feels to me like a far more resilient and sustainable way of eating.
Very good. So whereabouts would you get your perennial onions and garlic from?
So things like wild garlic, a lot of your your native allium bulbs, like your wild garlic, you can buy from wildflower seed suppliers. So we go to organic supply called Emmors Gates and places like that. If you're feeling you shouldn't really do this, and I shouldn't advise this, if there's a massive population of something somewhere, and sometimes if they're in a risk of being sprayed or etc., you can, I would informally give you a license to relocate them to a safe home. But technically you shouldn't be digging up plants in wild areas, certainly if they're in not in a decline, if they're in decline. There are increasing number of actually perennial vegetable suppliers now. Certainly in the last few years we've seen them. So incredible edible vegetables in the southwest. I see more and more each year online, all online, and you can just order these amongst other vegetables. And it's a good way to start them off, really.
Great, lots of good advice there. Anybody else want to chip in on this one?
Yeah, I just want to say I've actually had some success with planting annual, or what we consider annual, garlic, and I've heard also leeks, and not actually harvesting the bulb and leaving them in, and they've come back for 2 to 3 years afterwards. So it's not a different variety, it's kind of a typical annual plant, but it's left in the ground to then regenerate. And that's something I experimented with to see if actually it was possible to not eat the bulb and just eat the greens and see what would happen. So I had some success with that, which I was quite pleased with. Also things like Babington's leeks, tree onions, if you want actual perennial varieties, garlic chives, they've all got that nice allium-y flavour too.
Great. Any more?
Well, I've got wild garlic growing in the garden, and it goes really, really well. And it's obviously got a lot of attributes. And as Claire mentioned, chives would be one of my big recommendations. Like the flower, you can grow them from seeds, really cheap, and obviously a perennial. So, yeah, that would. I think Than and Claire had it all covered.
Good stuff. Thanks very much. Okay, let's move on to question 3. Roy in Derbyshire. Is it possible to live on a veganic diet that is entirely grown in the UK? I bet these guys are already doing it. What do you reckon? Do you guys just live pure on what you grow and forage? I bet you do, Than.
No, not at all. Sadly, no. That we are aiming towards that, and it definitely can be done, but not at all. Not for we just don't have enough land really at this point in time. So, I mean, I suppose again, fantastic question. Really, fruits and vegetables, absolutely no problem at all. We know that it can be grown with lots of green manures to replace the traditional conventional use of manures. And use of perennials and things, wood chip, organic matter, that can be done, not a problem. I suppose the question in lots of people's mind is protein, and that always seems to be the case on a vegan diet, let alone on a vegan organic diet, on a veganic diet. But there's loads and loads of good plant-based protein sources in the UK, and it's just simply a case of growing them veganically, like you'd apply to all the other things which we mentioned. So in terms of vegan protein, so there's a huge variety of pulses and beans that can be grown and are increasingly becoming more, they're becoming repopularized. There's a company called Hodmedods, which aren't veganic, by the way, but they are trying to get more people to eat pulses that are UK grown. So that it's Hodmedods, HODMEDOD, based in Suffolk. So lots of varieties there, and you can get an idea from them about what can be grown in the UK, and then sort of buy the seeds and start growing those things yourself. A few nuts can be grown. Certainly hazelnuts, we're aware, well known anyway. Walnuts are increasingly doing well in the UK. Almonds even a little bit in the south, so a bit variable, but can be grown. Hemp seeds, loads and loads of good protein sources out there, and also your seed oils. And it's simply a case of growing them with in your usual sort of green manures and your kind of veganic cultivation methods.
So are Hodmedods organic?
Hodmedods are organic mostly. They do have the ethos is very much organic. What they do is when a new sort of bean or pulse is being trialed, sometimes it's not possible because because they're new. It's new to the country in many ways. So they do allow farmers to use a little bit, but the idea is that those farmers are transitioning to be able to grow those crops fully organic. So they'll tend to have a huge organic range, and you have one or two things which are also non-organic as well. But the hope is that more and more of that will become available.
I mean, are any of these Hodmedods projects veganic by default?
I'm not sure of that. I think a lot of them may well be mixed organic farms, so they might be using animal because they're organic, right? So they're not going to be using any kind of synthetic fertilizers, or they're heading in that trajectory, and they might be using a little bit of pesticides. But I would think that their fertility is coming a fair bit from green manures and possibly from animals that are also being kept. But they may well be a few farms in there because they've got a base of suppliers. Hodmedods is essentially a hub for lots of these, working with lots of these farms to provide a market for British-grown pulses and grains. So they may be a veganic. supplier in there who's not labelled as such, but maybe so it's worth exploring. Yeah, definitely.
Interesting. Any more on this one? Eating veganic, Matthew? You're a pretty strong guy. You must be on a pretty much veganic diet.
I am, but not as much grown by myself as Claire and Than, that's for sure. You know, I kind of I've got an allotment 13 by 10, but you know, you need a lot of space, and you also need to have a lot of skills. You know, you need to be able to bottle stuff and pickle stuff. You know, but yeah, as Than said, it can be done.
Can be done. Claire, are you doing it?
Trying. I mean, in the absence of, a bit like Than said, in the absence of lots of products not being able to be found veganically, so you know, we've got lots of organic but not necessarily, and lots of plant-based foods, but are they grown veganically? There's not that many suppliers for things like pulses, grains. On the allotment this year, I'm going to attempt to grow millet, quinoa and oats.
Wow.
Which is a bit of a challenge. Millet is usually grown in the south of the country, but going to give it a go and see what I can do. So watch this space. Managed to get some buckwheat in last year. It was too late to actually seed, but going to give it a go and see what happens. Yeah, but yeah, like Matthew said, not enough to feed myself for the whole year.
Good stuff. Okay, let's go on. Question 4. We got 10 questions all together. Let's see if we can get through them. Here we go. We've got a long one here. Hello, can you give me any veganic advice on dealing with the invasive New Zealand flatworm, please? Likely migrated from my neighbour's garden with whom I share a boundary hedge. Obviously, as a long-term vegan, I don't wish to harm them, but I cannot find any other guidance apart from killing them. Any tips on keeping them at bay and saving my worms would be greatly appreciated. Kind regards, Ali Dando. There's a question. Any idea about this one?
I mean, yeah, it's a tough one. It really is a tough one. I haven't actually encountered it myself, New Zealand flatworm, unfortunately. It's a species that was introduced in the 60s through the horticultural trade. There are actually, incidentally, there are other flatworms, semi-invasive flatworms in the UK. There are about 4 native species of flatworm and 17 introduced, of which some are somewhere, but New Zealand flatworm being the sort of most well-known. I would say, like with anything in an organic growing sort of setup, diversity, encourage, create as many different habitat niches as possible to attract beneficial insects and those animals to predate the New Zealand flatworm. They're not massively preferred. This is what I understand by a lot of our native fauna. But they will definitely have to, if you encourage enough of your biodiversity. Some of those animals, like larvae of ground beetles, are known to eat New Zealand flatworms. I'm sure amphibians like newts and frogs might take them as well, and possibly even birds. So it's really a case of building that ecosystem with lots of different plants and lots of different habitats.
Excellent. Anyone want to contribute, or should we go on to the next question? Take that as next question. Okay, here we go. Question 5. Is it a good idea to gather leaves from my trees and put them under my apple and cherry tree? Thanks, Ali. Any advice for Ali and his apple and cherry tree? Should we put his leaves under his trees? Or should we put them in the compost bin?
I would say yes, and particularly the leaves that fall from the tree. But it's a good idea to sort of shred them up a bit, because you want them to rot them down quicker. I mean, you know, I live in London and I've got plain tree leaves blowing around my garden and they never rot. So the only way to get them to rot down is to shred them. So I would say, you know, leave leaves where they fall. But if you want them to do more good, try and shred them up a bit when they do fall. But yeah, Than, Claire.
But what if you have like leaves on the street? If you're living on a street and there's lots of leaves, because they obviously come off all the trees. What should you do with all those leaves? Should you try and use them?
Yeah. Leaves very valuable resource. You know, get as many as you can together and stick them in a bag and get them rotting. Yeah, I mean they're brilliant for creating some sort of compost or mulch.
Okay.
Yeah, I think provided it's not like a very polluted road. Yeah, definitely, it's a resource that everyone sort of goes to waste, but it's fantastic when it breaks down. Just be careful about what it's sort of contamination and things like that. But on the whole, if it's a quiet residential road, why not? Yeah, again, as Matt was saying, avoid kind of thick leaves like your planes, possible sycamores. They tend to mat if they fall. So shredding them up would probably speed up the process of decomposition. But, you know, like normal standard deciduous leaves, like your limes, beeches, oaks and things, yeah, they break down fine. You don't even need to shred them. They're small leaves anyway. The other thing to avoid, maybe if it's evergreen leaves, which whether you prunings or whether they've shed occasion, which, you know, even evergreens shed on a 3-4 year cycle anyway. So like holly and eucalyptus leaves and things like that, then maybe compost them separately, or rather than putting them straight onto your.
So when you say shred, how do you shred them?
You can put them in a shredder, or you can shred them by hand.
Shred them by hand. How do you do that?
Rip them up.
Rip them up.
Yeah.
How small do you have to rip them up to?
How long's a piece of string?
You've got a great big bit of leaves. Just right.
Get the kids to do it.
Get the kids to do it. Okay, get the kids to do anything would be a fine thing, right?
True.
Okay. I think the other thing I wanted to add was if you're wary that a tree is diseased, for example, particularly of the same species, then maybe avoid that as well, just in case passing on any kind of pathogens as well. Just an extra bit of caution, I suppose.
Okie dokie. Okay, let's go for question 6. Hello, please advise the best kind of trees to plant at the end of a garden that will not cause problems for house foundations. Think about 3 trees in a row. It doesn't actually say how big her house and her garden is, but there we go, guys and girls.
Yeah. I think with most trees, trees are sort of the risk from trees are overhyped. It's quite crazy now. So most trees, certainly fruiting trees, do not pose. Their root systems are far too small to cause any kind of damage. Most tree roots are shallow anyway, even your larger trees. The things, so any kind of fruiting tree, your apples, pears, plums, cherries, absolutely fine. Certainly if you're also choosing a slightly like a half standard tree, yeah? So that's half your considerably smaller than a full form, like a wild variety. Which is mostly what's available anyway. You know, most fruiting trees are on slightly dwarfing rootstocks, the ones that are available. So any of those would be fine. I suppose the trees to avoid, possibly if they're too close, are like your big canopy native trees. Like, you know, if you were to plant an oak right next to your house, of course, that might cause a problem. Eucalyptus tends to be the one I encounter a lot in terms of causing structural damage and things. But yeah, I mean, you wouldn't really want to. It's a massive tree. Eucalyptus in full height is a formidable tree, and it doesn't really belong in this sort of environment because it's, you know, it's a very aggressive tree that's adapted to a very different ecosystem, which we brought over in sort of colonial times. So it's we should be using a lot more smaller native species and fruit trees, really, and you're fairly safe there to choose any that you please.
What about twisted willow?
Oh, you mean like a corkscrew willow, kind of the?
Yeah, we've got a twisted willow, which is it's really close to the house actually. We think about what to do with whether we should be trying to cut the roots or something. It's about how far is it from the house? It's about 2 meters maybe from the house.
Is it quite? How tall is it?
It's massive. I mean, I think it just was just like a stick in the garden, and now it's like as big as the house practically.
Right. I mean, it's worth getting an arboriculture to check it out. The thing is, the tendency of arboriculture is to kind of do works because their money depends on carrying out works. So that's something to be wary of. But if you can find someone sort of ecological, a bit more sort of environmentally minded, to do some sort of root thinning works and stuff like that, if you think it's causing any sort of crack. The other tree related to willows, poplars, are also fairly aggressive. So if you plant them very, very close, that could cause an issue. But I would say if you're not noticing anything in your house or any kind of cracks or anything like that, then it should be okay. But if you're getting worried, then get a professional sort of ecological.
Well, I'm not worried now. You've given me the go ahead.
or coppice. If it's a willow, it should be you can coppice it and use that as a wood chip. Fantastic wood chip material, actually, from a depending on or pollard. And that regenerates.
Right, rather than dealing with the roots, just coppice it or pollard it.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Cool. Any more on trees to plant outside your house or not to plant outside your house? Okay, let's go on to the next question. Number 7. Hello, please advise best cat. Oh no, we just done that one, haven't we? Oh, we're on number 8 actually. We're getting there. Is there anything I can forage?
Forage.
So I can't spell. At this time of year, Alex in Kent. Come on, do Mathew or Claire have a turn, Than?
I'm happy to start unless you've got anything urgent to get out, Mathew.
No, go for it, Claire.
So this is a great time of year for all those kind of springtime greens that are really good for helping after quite a stagnant winter get things moving in the body. So the likes of your dandelion leaves, your cleavers, or sticky willy, goosegrass, depending on where you're from, how you call it, chickweed. All these things that are starting to pop out that are enjoying the slightly longer days and warmer weather. Fantastic juiced, fantastic in salads. Really great greens to be foraging at this time of year.
Cool.
I'd add to that what Than was talking about before, the nettles. You might be getting some young nettles now. Young nettles are the best time of year to get them when they're young, when they're not stinging and they're tender. So I would say them. Well, garlic will be quite soon. So yeah, that's a brilliant one. That's fine to harvest from the wild. As Stan said, it's a bit dodgy to dig up, but harvesting is brilliant.
I'm going to throw in something a bit more unusual. Hazel catkins, even birch catkins at this time of year. Now we normally think of protein sources as being in the nuts themselves, but actually the catkins and the pollen certainly are fantastic sources because all of that energy is being diverted. The plant's moving that towards the production of flowers and then eventually nuts. So very, very nutritious food. It's a bit astringent, a bit bitter, but so if you pick them too early, but at this time of year, absolutely fantastic. Put them in your stir fries, make a tea with it, and a great nutritional addition at this time of year. Something that tends to get overlooked, actually. We sort of think of leaves, nuts, seeds, but actually even the flowers and catkin is essentially a flower, right? So trees.
Excellent. We'll all be out foraging tomorrow. Let's have a look. What trees and shrubs can I make use of to attract beneficial insects, birds, and other creatures into the garden? Thanks, Robert, Scotland.
It's a very tree-focused Q&A, this thing.
It does seem to be.
Yeah. I mean, fantastic, though. Great questions. I mean, so much. Yeah, so much to choose from. I would say, again, a mixed native hedge is fantastic. Pack in lots of different species in close proximity, and you get attract lots of diversity in that way. In terms of big hitters in the biodiversity, but in terms of biodiversity, silver birch, fantastic tree. very light, airy canopy, so you can work with it in the understory as well. Around about 300 species in the UK, which rely on birch. Oak, again, if you've got a larger space, nothing like an oak. It really is the quintessential tree of this country in many ways, and it attracted something like about 2,300 species that rely on oak, and about 300 which rely only on oak. So this is 300 different species of fungi, insects, birds that rely solely on oak. Quite incredible tree. But for a smaller setting, I would probably say things like maybe a Coppet's lime or a beech that could attract lots of beneficial insects, which will then feed on your be fed on by birds, and you could eat the leaves as well. So think about multiple values from a tree. Biodiversity, can you eat some of the leaves? Can you get some fruits and seeds from those trees as well? Then you're making for a more resilient system.
Brilliant. Anything to add, Claire?
Yeah, I noticed the person that asked this question from Scotland. I'd be interested about where exactly in Scotland you are and what native plants and trees and shrubs are growing around there, and working with some of those. Potentially some of the wild roses would be really nice. The hips can provide food, they can provide shelter. Also, not trees or shrubs, but thinking about some climbers, so things that might be able to give some habitat for birds to come and hide in and nest in, spiders and other insects, things like that. So yeah, looking around what's growing around you, and what might work with the size of your space, because we also don't know how big a space you've got, and making some choices to get a variety of different habitats and also food crops for different species.
Brilliant.
I'd also, just talking about trees that do lots of things, like you've got a crabapple which has got blossom, nectar, pollen, leaves, and obviously crabapples. Does a lot of things, like Sam was saying, it's got a lot of habitats there. And blackthorn's just coming out at the moment. Blackthorn comes out before hawthorn, so it's early flowering, so that's going to attract wildlife really quite early in the season. So the native blackthorn and hawthorn are great options.
Actually, the cherry plum, actually, even earlier as well, quite incredible. Yeah, with something that's overlooked. So many of these trees is lurking around, we don't get talked about in mainstream circles.
Well, we're talking about them. Good stuff. Well, we've gone over our 45 minutes. That was a quick peek at the final question. Should we do it, or should we leave it to the next show? What do you reckon? Do we have to get down the pub, or put the babies to bed or something? Or should we go for the question? Should we have a vote on it?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Wild enthusiasm there amongst the panel. Can I sow anything at this time of year in the UK in colder climates? And what can I do in the garden to prepare for the growing season? Julie, Bournemouth. Maybe we don't want this question after all. Do we want this question?
Yeah.
Okay, right. Well, let's go for it then. Who wants to go first? Matthew?
Okay, I put in some potatoes last weekend. I live in London, so you used to say St. Patrick's Day, but I reckon you can do it a bit earlier now if you get early. So you want to be looking for earlies in terms of potatoes. And you could put in rhubarb crowns, you put in raspberry canes, as we were talking about earlier on, and obviously plant trees when they're dormant in the winter. In terms of sowing seed, you kind of want to do it inside at the moment. So there's all sorts of things you could be sowing in greenhouses or sort of propagators indoors to try and get them going, even when it's a bit cold, like even sort of tomatoes or but I'm sure the panel have got lots of good advice too. So over to you two.
I have been starting to think about, got all the seeds out because we're in the northeast, so a bit further away. Still got a little bit more time. Starting to think about tomatoes and which varieties to sow, and start sowing them on a nice sunny south facing windowsill. all your kind of chilies, peppers, aubergines, cucumbers if you're into growing that kind of thing. Now is a good time of year. Peas, broad beans, if you like culinary herbs, things like basil. Good time of year for those kind of things. And like Mathew said, your kind of fruit crops, so currants and strawberries to go in if you need to or want to put any of those in. What I would say if you're doing clearing in the garden is maybe wait a little bit longer. I disturbed a newt yesterday in the garden. I was quite frantically doing a spring clean now that we've got a bit more sunshine, and disturbed a newt that was overwintering underneath some of the undergrowth. So I would say hang on a little bit if you're thinking about suddenly doing a spring clean and cutting everything back, because there might still be things overwintering in your garden.
I bet you haven't got anything to add, have you, Than?
No, I think in terms of things to do, I was going to say, again, I don't want to bring it back to trees, but I am. Certainly last time, just about enough time to prune your apples and pears and your pome fruits. So quinces and medlars included in that before leaf burst. So this is a good time of year to formatively prune, do any kind of pruning works to those trees. Tree planting, this is a good window while the trees and shrubs are dormant. To put them in as well before spring. Plums, cherries, and I think you sort of wait till they come out of leaf. Slightly different pruning system, but yeah, there's definitely lots of things you can do.
Magic. Wow, well done, everybody. We got all 10 questions in. Great panel, great show. Thanks everybody for watching. Thanks to the panel, and look forward to the next show next month, Veganic Gardeners Question Time. Remember, join the Vegan Organic Network. We need your support to help us do all the incredible work in transforming the food system. So thanks for watching, and thank you very much to the panel. Thank you, and good night.